when it comes to China, for a long time, we assumed that their grand strategy or long-term vision was to basically exist within those norms, accept them, and use them to get as wealthy as possible. I would say that that was widely accepted for quite a long time. But today, when you look at China, you could make a good argument that that might no longer be their main priority anymore. So, in your view, what is, if we're talking about grand strategy, what is that in case of China? And doesn't China's grand strategy, as it looks now, is it directly contradicting with that of the United States?
Okay, so again, I'm going to back up with some basic information, or what I believe to be useful information. So when Deng Xiaoping comes in, his reforms and strengthening the Communist Party rule run on parallel. So if you allow peasants to be more productive, that makes the country wealthier, and that's wonderful. And so that goes, and then it also applies to private businesses and things. But then you fast forward 20 years or so, and then you've got a much better educated population in China. You have really developed large multinational corporations, or corporations with global reach in China. And all of a sudden, the Communist Party feels that these people are competitors for political power. And you think about, well, what do people want at that level of economic development? And it's often political say that somehow reflects their economic contributions. Well, the Communist Party has made clear that that's off the table. That when Xi Jinping came to power, he convened his experts on the Soviet Union and said, tell me, why did the Soviet Union collapse? And he learned political reforms before economic reforms. That was a disaster. Another piece he learned is that the Soviets had allowed flourishing cultures within all their nationality-based republics. So the Kazakhs had leadership positions in Kazakhstan, and the Kazakh language was flourishing. The problem when the Soviet Union fell apart, there were these discrete units that were perfect for an independent Tajikistan and an independent Kazakhstan. So China's like, no way. So you wonder why it's doing what it's doing to the Uyghurs. That's part of it. It's part of the lesson. It's like, we're going to commit genocide, so these people aren't going to be around to hack off Xinjiang. So that's one thing. And then when you're thinking about China getting strong internationally, Deng Xiaoping absolutely did open to the world and all of this commerce, and it ran on parallel. But what Xi Jinping's ultimate goal was, that we don't know. But you can see for many years just cooperating within the international system. And then you also said that, well, the West assumed the Chinese would always cooperate. And the same assumption applies to German assumptions about buying gas from Russians. It was like, hey, they're making lots of money. Why on earth? And this is actually one of the beauties of the rules-based order is if you just join the party, we'll welcome you in. You will make money. Your alternatives to this, no one's come up with a better one. And by the way, if you do come up with a better one, we'll probably adjust our own system to incorporate your best practices. I mean, that's what the rules-based order isn't what the United States tells people what to do. Give me a break. Why would anyone, people do their own thing. It's what we as human beings on this planet agree to do, the treaties that we agree to sign on to with whatever provisos there are. So that is all background. Now for China. Oh, one more piece. What's Western civilization? Like, who are we? And then when we establish that, we can look at who are they. If my read of Western civilization is, it's based on three pillars. Greek analytical thinking. This law of identity is one of them, right? Things have to, and the other one, law of non-contradiction, can't have mutually exclusive things going on. Another one's Roman law, all of these laws and the institutions to enforce them. It's not about personal rule, even though the West has had plenty of that. And then Christian values, whether or not you're a Christian. And the key one is that the individual counts, that the individual has a soul, and that thing comes, the soul precedes governments. So if you add those three things together, I think that's core Western civilization. And there are loads of people in the world who know much more about it than I do, maybe have got better kind of counter arguments. Okay, what's Chinese civilization? Um, I think the Chinese put a primacy on avoiding chaos. If you think of the wars that have afflicted that place over thousands of years, Chinese have been raising and arming armies denominated in hundreds of thousands of people for thousands of years. The West does not do this on a regular basis, as far as I understand, until the Napoleonic Wars. But Chinese have been butchering each other for a long, long time. And so generations of Chinese understand that the chaos of warfare is to be avoided. So what's the ideal? It's tianxia. It's all under heaven. That's the name, one of the names for China. It's when you unite all under heaven, then it's a theoretical state, and that is when you have peace and order and prosperity. So then if there are different values, so in the West, we talk about rights. In Chinese civilization, which is based on the Han ethnic group, that form the preponderance of China's population, people have obligations. It's not rights; it's obligations. What you owe different groups. Whereas the individual is the primary unit of society in the West, and China, it's groups. These have different implications. Governments and structures of authority in China have always been top down, right? Confucianism, top down. Communists, top down. Now, the communists have set up some pretty robust party institutions and administrative institutions, but unlike the West, which cements its institutions with laws, you can go open the law book, see what law applies. You disagree, you go to court, someone adjudicates, it's imperfect. You have to get over the imperfections, you have a succession of appeals courts, and you hope that the totality of it all will lead to a just outcome. China, there's something different. It's called guanxi. Guanxi are relations, human relations. Well, we've all got those. It's just more so in China. It's the way I think of a guanxi network, it's like an inverse family tree. So you have the original ancestor, their siblings, and their siblings, and their siblings, and their siblings go all the way down. So that this person at the top runs this guanxi network. So this person at the top says deploy to these two people, and they deploy all the way down. You aren't even sure how the bottom of that guanxi network is deploying. But I believe that this is fundamental how Chinese institutions run. And so when you look at Xi Jinping, he's got quite a guanxi network attached to him. And it's a different way of gluing together the world. And they're fundamentally different. So you have a Western order that's rules-based, it's universalistic. The Chinese world order is based on Chinese civilization, and historically the Chinese believed there was one civilization, theirs. Everybody else were barbarians. And the assumption of that one is that it would eventually just spread. People would naturally sinify, right? Sinocentric, these words, sinification, those sorts of words don't apply to other countries the way they do China, right? This is just a piece of Chinese culture. And that's the natural order of things, is China at the center. So for years, in the mid 19th century, when the Westerners came and they defeated China on China's territory, what a gross embarrassment. And then the Japanese doubled down on all of that. For Chinese today, it's the great moment to return Asia to normalcy and the world to normalcy, which is China at the center. And it's also that, like the Russians, it's this continental view that if I own a lot of territory, that makes me important. The more I have, the better. And then they treat the seas like territory because they're going to more seas, the better. Whereas in the maritime order, seas are the network that connects everybody. It's freedom of navigation. What good does a sea do you if you can't get within 500 miles of someone's coastline? You can't deliver anything or pick anything up. So they're antithetical world orders. The Chinese historically deal only bilaterally with people. They still do. Like, what's China's massive alliance system? It doesn't. And it treats smaller. It says these things routinely. It treats smaller powers as inferiors, which means just about everybody on the planet is smaller, so everyone's an inferior, and they're going to go boss people around. And so then, when you're looking at all this, someone of your generation ought to consider, so what does Putin want the world to look like in 50 years? What does Xi Jinping want the world to look like in 50 years? What does the West want the world to look like in 50 years? And you can imagine it. Two of them, the visions are really dystopian. There's only one that's any good so far, till someone comes up with something better. And it clearly isn't Xi Jinping, who's been tanking his growth rates through his domestic repression. So what did I miss in your question?
If you're enjoying this podcast, chances are that you like to know what's going on in the world of geopolitics. And if that's the case, you might want to sign up to my newsletter. There's a lot of news on geopolitics, but most of it just doesn't actually matter. It's just chasing headlines, emotions, and breaking news. What I want to do is to try to separate all this noise and find the signal, the stuff that actually does matter and will have consequences months and years down the line. And so in every edition, I pick out 3 things that do matter and explain why and what will be their future impact. You can find the link in the description, so check it out and sign up to stay informed.